Doyen stood in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council and felt small. The room stretched upward for what seemed like miles, filled with floating platforms where alien delegates sat in their designated spaces. Some breathed methane, others lived in water tanks, and a few existed as clouds of gas contained in force fields. 847 species, all older than humanity, all looking down at the newest members. 20 years had passed since Earth received the invitation. 20 years since Doyen had walked into this chamber with hope burning in his chest. He remembered that day clearly. He had believed humanity would finally take its place among the stars as equals. He had been wrong. The first proposal humanity made was rejected within minutes. It was a simple trade agreement, offering Earth's agricultural products to worlds that needed food. The Council didn't even debate it. They simply moved on to the next item. Doyen had thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. Every proposal after that met the same fate. When human colonies requested protection from pirates, the Council peacekeepers never arrived. When human merchants tried to establish trade routes through neutral space, they were denied permits that other species received automatically. When human scientists offered breakthroughs in medical technology, the Council's research division refused to even review the data. Mina Park knew the truth before most others did. As captain of the Earth Defense Fleet vessel Horizon, she patrolled the borders of human space and watched Council ships ignore distress calls from human freighters. She watched pirates attack human colonies while Council peacekeepers sat in orbit around alien worlds just 2 systems away. She filed report after report, and each one was met with silence. One night, she sat in her quarters and stared at the star charts. Humanity controlled 12 systems with 73 colonies spread across them. They were growing fast, building faster than any species in recorded Council history. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe the Council saw humanity's rapid expansion as a threat, or maybe they just didn't care. Dr. Ji-Won Choi didn't set out to destroy Earth's relationship with the Council. She was a scientist, not a politician. Her work focused on studying alien biology, trying to understand how different species evolved on different worlds. It was fascinating work, and she loved it. Then she found the files. They were hidden in a public database, encrypted but not well enough. Ji-Won had been researching genetic markers in the Vrelian species when she noticed strange patterns. Some Vrelian DNA samples contained markers from other species, ones that shouldn't exist naturally. She dug deeper, breaking through layers of security that became more complex with each level. What she found made her sick. The Vrelian hierarchy had been conducting experiments on pre-spaceflight civilizations. They would abduct members of these primitive species, alter their genetics, and return them to their worlds to see how the changes affected their evolution. It was illegal under every Council law. It was monstrous. Ji-Won took her evidence to Doyen immediately. He brought it to the Council floor the next day, interrupting a session about trade regulations to present the proof. The chamber fell silent as he showed image after image, data file after data file. The evidence was clear and undeniable. The Vrelian ambassador rose from his platform, his multiple eyes fixed on Doyen. His voice, translated by the chamber's systems, was cold and sharp. He accused humanity of espionage, of fabricating evidence, of trying to undermine the Council's stability. He demanded that Earth be punished for these crimes. Doyen couldn't believe what he was hearing. He looked around the chamber, waiting for someone to defend humanity, to demand an investigation at the very least. No one spoke. The Council moved to vote on whether to even consider Ji-Won's evidence. The vote failed. 846 species voted against humanity. Only Earth voted in favor. Then the Vrelians issued a threat. If humanity continued with these accusations, they would consider it an act of war. The Council would not protect Earth from Vrelian retaliation. The message was clear: drop the issue or face destruction. Yuna Lee was premier of Earth's government when the news reached her. She had been in office for 5 years, and she had spent every day of those years fighting for humanity's place in the Council. She had believed that patience and diplomacy would win respect eventually. Now, watching the Council recordings, she knew the truth. Respect would never come. The Council saw humanity as children playing at being adults, and nothing would change their minds. She called for an emergency session of Earth's government. Representatives from every colony attended via hologram. The debate lasted 3 days. Some argued that leaving the Council would isolate humanity, cut them off from the galaxy's resources and knowledge. Others said that the council had already isolated them, that membership meant nothing if it came with no benefits and only contempt. Yuna listened to every voice. Then she made her decision. Earth would hold a vote among all human colonies. Every citizen would have their say. The question was simple. Should humanity remain in the Galactic Council? The vote took 1 week to complete. When the results came in, they were overwhelming. 93% of humanity voted to leave. The people had spoken. Doyen was given the honor of delivering the final message. He stood in the council chamber one last time, facing the platforms filled with alien delegates. Most of them weren't even paying attention. They were having side conversations, reviewing data on their screens, treating this as just another routine session. He began speaking, and slowly, the chamber quieted. "We came to you with hope," Doyen said. "We believed that joining the council meant joining a community of equals, working together for the good of all species. We were wrong." Now he had their attention. Every delegate was watching him. "For 20 years we have been ignored, dismissed, and insulted. Our proposals rejected without consideration. Our people left unprotected. Our evidence of crimes dismissed without investigation. You do not see us as equals. You see us as primitives, unworthy of your time or respect." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You mistake age for wisdom. You mistake size for strength. You have built a bureaucracy so tangled in its own rules that it cannot act, cannot change, cannot grow. You call us young and aggressive as if youth were a weakness and passion were a flaw. But we are not the ones who are weak." His voice grew stronger. "We are leaving. We will build our own path among the stars. We will protect our own people. We will make our own alliances, and we will show the galaxy what humanity can achieve when we are not held back by your fear and your pride." He transmitted the formal withdrawal documents to the council's records. Then he turned and walked out of the chamber. He didn't look back. The human delegation left the council station that same day. Every human citizen in council space received orders to return home within the month. Embassies closed. Trade offices shut down. The Human Systems Alliance was born, independent and free. Mina Park watched the council station shrink in her view screen as the fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed. She smiled. For the first time in 20 years, she felt hope again. They were going home and they were going to build something better. The council didn't understand what they had lost. Not yet, but they would learn. Humanity had left and the galaxy would never be the same. 50 years had passed since humanity left the council. Taeho Shin barely remembered those days. He was only 5 years old when the withdrawal happened, too young to understand the politics or the anger. Now, at 55, he was the lead engineer of the Human Systems Alliance's Advanced Propulsion Division, and he had just solved a problem that had puzzled scientists for decades. The new jump drive sat in his lab, looking deceptively simple. It was smaller than the old council-designed drives that humanity had been using, but it could move a ship twice as fast. The secret was in the quantum field alignment, a solution that seemed obvious in hindsight. Taeho wondered why no one had thought of it before. Then he remembered. Council species didn't like taking risks. They preferred proven technology, even if it was slow. Humanity didn't have that luxury. When they left the council, they lost access to established trade routes and supply networks. They had to innovate or die, so they innovated. Within a year, every ship in the human defense fleet was equipped with the new drives. Human merchants could now cross their territory in days instead of weeks. Colony ships could reach distant systems faster than ever. The Human Systems Alliance, once confined to 12 systems, began expanding rapidly. New colonies sprouted on distant worlds. New mining operations opened in asteroid belts. Humanity was growing and no one could stop them. Admiral Hyeji Nam stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable, and watched a fleet exercise through the view screen. 200 ships moved in perfect formation, executing complex maneuvers at speeds that would have been impossible with old technology. She had been training these crews for 5 years and they were ready for anything, or so she hoped. Hyeji had joined the defense fleet 30 years ago, fresh out of the academy and full of idealism. She had risen through the ranks quickly, earning her position through skill and determination. She had fought pirates, rescued stranded colonists, and defended human space from anyone who thought they could take advantage of humanity's isolation. Because humanity was isolated. After leaving the council, They had no allies among the stars. Every species in the galaxy was a potential threat. That reality shaped everything about human military doctrine. They couldn't rely on help from others, so they became strong enough to stand alone. The fleet exercise ended successfully. Hiji allowed herself a small smile. Humanity might be alone, but they were not weak. Meanwhile, in Council space, things were falling apart. Counselor Thexamar reviewed the latest reports with growing frustration. The pandemic that started from the Vrelian experiments had spread to 14 worlds now. Millions were dead. The Council's response had been slow and uncoordinated. Every decision required debates, votes, committees, and approvals. By the time action was authorized, it was too late. The quarantine protocols finally passed after 6 months of deliberation. By then, 3 more worlds were infected. The Council peacekeeping fleet was ordered to enforce the quarantine, but they were spread too thin. Half the fleet was tied up in ceremonial duties, escorting dignitaries and maintaining presence at important worlds. There weren't enough ships to patrol the quarantine zones effectively. Thexamar remembered when humanity proposed military reforms 20 years before they left. The humans had argued that the peacekeeping fleet should be reorganized, made more efficient and responsive. The proposal was rejected. Now Thexamar understood why humans made that suggestion. They had seen the problems that the Council refused to acknowledge. He wondered what humanity was doing now. The Council had received no communication from them in 50 years. It was as if they had vanished from the galaxy entirely. Actually, the Council had tried to contact humanity. 3 diplomatic envoys were sent over the decades, each carrying messages of reconciliation and offers of renewed dialogue. All 3 were turned away at the border of human space. Kyun Bay was Earth's border liaison, stationed at the edge of human territory where it met neutral space. His job was simple: receive Council messages, acknowledge receipt, and provide no further response. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. When the first envoy arrived, Kyun had been curious. Maybe the Council had finally learned some humility. Maybe they wanted to apologize for the past. He read their message carefully. It was full of diplomatic language about mutual cooperation and shared interest, but there was no apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just an assumption that humanity would be grateful for another chance to join them. Kyun sent the standard response. Message received. Earth has no interest in resuming relations at this time. The second envoy came 10 years later with a similar message. The third came 15 years after that. Each time, Kyun sent the same response. Humanity had moved on, and they had moved on to something better. While the Council struggled with bureaucracy and pandemic, human space thrived. New colonies reported record populations. Trade between human worlds reached levels that exceeded Council projections by 300%. Human technology advanced at a pace that amazed even their own scientists. Sora Lim captained a merchant freighter called the Morning Star. She hauled cargo between human colonies, mostly raw materials and manufactured goods. It was honest work and paid well. She had been doing it for 20 years and loved every minute. She also loved listening to Council news broadcasts. They were encrypted, but human intelligence had cracked those codes decades ago. Every ship in human space could tune in if they wanted. Sora made it a habit during her long jumps between systems. The news was always bad. Pirates were raiding Council shipping lanes. Trade routes were disrupted. Economic growth was stagnant. The Council couldn't agree on solutions because every decision required consensus among 847 species. Sora particularly enjoyed the reports about the Korthax raiders. They were a pirate group that had been a minor nuisance when humanity was still in the Council. Human patrol ships used to keep them in check, chasing them away from neutral zones and protecting merchant traffic. After humanity left, the Korthax grew bold. Now they operated openly, attacking Council shipping with impunity. The Council kept passing resolutions condemning piracy. The Korthax kept raiding ships. Words meant nothing without action to back them up. Sora docked at Taiyang Station, a massive human-built trading hub in the Epsilon system. As she unloaded her cargo, she overheard other merchants talking about Council ships that had tried to enter human space, looking to trade. They were turned away. Human space was closed to Council species, no exceptions. Some of the younger merchants asked why. Why hold grudges for so long? Why not open trade and make profit? The older merchants, the ones who remembered the council days, explained, it wasn't about grudges. It was about respect. The council needed to understand that humanity wasn't desperate for their approval anymore. When the council was ready to treat humans as equals, not as children begging for scraps, then maybe things could change. Until then, humanity would continue on its own path. Kuhn received another message from the council. This one was different. It wasn't from a low-level diplomat. It was from High Counselor Veltarin himself, the leader of the entire Galactic Council. The message acknowledged past mistakes. It spoke of changed circumstances and new understanding. It requested a formal meeting to discuss future relations. Kuhn read it 3 times. It was the closest thing to an apology the Council had ever sent. He forwarded it to Earth's government and waited for instructions. The response came back within a day. Message received. Earth's position remains unchanged. Kuhn sent the standard reply and filed the report. He suspected this wouldn't be the last message from the Council. Something was making them desperate. He didn't know what yet, but he would find out eventually. In the Council chambers, Veltarin reviewed humanity's rejection with weary eyes. He had hoped that a personal message would make a difference. It hadn't. Humanity was truly done with them. The problem was that the Council wasn't done with humanity. They needed what humans had built. They needed human technology, human efficiency, human willingness to act decisively, but pride prevented most Council members from admitting it. How do you ask for help from someone you insulted for decades? How do you rebuild a relationship you destroyed through arrogance and neglect? Veltarin didn't have answers to those questions. Not yet. But he knew that eventually, the Council would have to find them. The galaxy was changing, and the old ways weren't working anymore. Humanity had shown them that. Now the Council had to learn it the hard way. 50 years of silence stretched between the Council and humanity. 50 years of separate development. 50 years of growing apart. The gap seemed impossible to bridge. But the universe has a way of forcing change, sometimes through choice, sometimes through necessity. For the Galactic Council, that necessity was coming faster than anyone realized. The silence was about to be broken, but not in the way anyone expected. The first world died in silence. No distress call. No warning. One day, the colony world of Therax 4 was thriving with 6 billion souls. The next day, sensors showed nothing but debris and cooling ash. The Galactic Council sent investigation teams, but they found no survivors. No clues. Just death. 3 weeks later, another world went silent. Then another. Then 5 more in a single day. The Council finally understood they were under attack when the enemy revealed themselves. They came from beyond the galactic rim, from the dark space where no one had ever explored. They called themselves Nothing because they didn't communicate. The Council named them the Carrack Swarm, and the name fit. They moved like insects, thousands of ships acting as one mind, overwhelming every defense through sheer numbers. Fleet Commander Zix Thorel had served in the Council peacekeeping forces for 200 years. He had broken up disputes, prevented wars, and kept peace across thousands of systems. He had never fought a real battle until the Carracks arrived. Now he fought one every week, and he lost every single time. His fleet was designed for policing, not warfare. The ships were built for presence and intimidation, not combat efficiency. They were big, slow, and impressive looking. Against pirates and minor threats, that was enough. Against the Carracks, it was suicide. The latest engagement ended like all the others. The Carrack ships, smaller and faster than Council vessels, swarmed his formation from multiple directions. His ships tried to maintain formation, following the tactical doctrine that had been used for centuries. The Carracks ignored the doctrine and attacked from angles the Council ships couldn't cover. Within 2 hours, Zix Thorel lost 30 ships and retreated with the survivors. 37 worlds had fallen in 6 months. Billions were dead. The Council's response was inadequate and getting worse. Every battle strategy required approval from multiple committees. Every tactical decision needed consensus. By the time orders reached the front lines, the situation had already changed. Zix Thorel sent report after report to the Council, explaining that they needed to change their approach. They needed faster ships, more aggressive tactics, and commanders who could make decisions without waiting for committee approval. His reports were reviewed, discussed, and filed away without action. The bureaucracy that had kept peace for millennia was now causing defeat after defeat. High Counselor Veltarin knew the truth that no one wanted to say out loud. The Council was losing this war. Not slowly, but catastrophically. At the current rate, the Carracks would reach the core worlds within 2 years. Once they hit the densely populated inner systems, the death toll would climb from billions to trillions. He called an emergency session of the Inner Council, the small group of 7 species that truly governed the galaxy. The meeting was closed to all other members, held in a secure chamber with no recording devices. What they discussed would never appear in official records. "We're dying," said Counselor Lysara of the Mytharian Collective. Her homeworld had been destroyed 3 weeks ago. She had watched it happen through long-range sensors, helpless to intervene. "Every day we lose more territory. Our fleets can't stop them. Our weapons barely scratch their ships. At this rate, the Council will collapse within 5 years." The others murmured agreement. They had all seen the casualty reports. The numbers were staggering and getting worse. "What about the new weapons research?" asked another counselor. "The plasma cannons that the Vrelians developed?" "Tested and failed," Veltaran replied. "The Carrack ships have adaptive shielding. They adjust to whatever we throw at them within minutes. We need something they can't predict. Tactics they can't adapt to." "You're talking about humanity," Lysara said quietly. The chamber fell silent. For 50 years, no one had seriously discussed humanity in the Inner Council. They were the departed, the ones who rejected the Council's wisdom and went their own way. Bringing them up was admitting a mistake that no one wanted to acknowledge, but Lysara had nothing left to lose. Her world was gone, her people scattered as refugees across other Council worlds. Intelligence reports show that humanity fought off 3 Carrack scouting fleets, she continued. Not just fought them off, but destroyed them completely with minimal losses. Their ships are faster than ours. Their weapons are more innovative. And their crews actually know how to fight. "They're barbarians," one counselor said. "Their tactics are aggressive and reckless. And effective," Lysara shot back. "We called them primitive for being aggressive. Now we're dying because we aren't aggressive enough. Maybe they understood something we didn't. Maybe they knew that the galaxy isn't as peaceful as we pretended it was." Veltaran watched the debate carefully. He had been thinking about humanity for months now, reviewing old records from their time in the Council. He remembered Doyen's final speech, the accusations of bureaucratic paralysis and inability to act. At the time, he had dismissed it as sour grapes from a rejected species. Now those words felt prophetic. "If we ask humanity for help, what would we offer them?" another counselor asked. "They've made it clear they want nothing to do with us." "We offer them what they always wanted," Veltaran said. "Recognition as equals. A seat at this table. Real power, not ceremonial membership. We give them everything they asked for 50 years ago and more. You want to give them an Inner Council seat?" The objection came from multiple voices at once. "That's unprecedented. No species has ever been elevated to the Inner Council after just 20 years of regular membership, and they left the Council entirely." "So is extinction," Veltaran replied. "Would you rather maintain tradition or survive? Because those are our options now." The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for pride, for finding another solution, for continuing the fight without humanity's help. But the casualty reports kept coming in during the discussion. Another world fell while they argued. 4 billion more dead. Finally they voted. 4 in favor of contacting humanity, 3 against. It was the narrowest possible margin, but it was enough. "If we do this, we offer them a real seat at this table," Veltaran said. "Not a ceremonial position. Real power. Real say in how the Council operates. We will acknowledge our past mistakes formally and publicly. We will pay reparations. We will grant them territorial rights we denied before. And we will do whatever else they demand within reason." "They'll humiliate us," one counselor warned. "We humiliated them first," Lysara said. "For 20 years we treated them like children. We dismissed their proposals without consideration. We ignored their warnings. We let them be attacked by pirates while our peacekeepers did nothing. If we face some humiliation now, we've earned it." Veltaran looked around the table. "Is everyone clear on what we're proposing? We're not asking humanity for a favor. We're begging them to save us. The price will be high and we'll pay it. Are we agreed?" Slowly, the counselors nodded. Even the 3 who voted against contacting humanity understood the necessity. Pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. The hardest part would be the Vrelians. They were a powerful member species, and humanity had made it clear that they wanted justice for the genetic experiments. That would require putting a council member on trial, something that had never been done before. It would weaken the Council's unity even further. But what unity remained if everyone was dead? Veltaran began drafting the message to humanity. It needed to be perfect, acknowledging past wrongs without making excuses, explaining the current crisis without sounding desperate, offering concessions without appearing weak. Every word mattered. He worked on it for 3 days, revising constantly. Finally, he had something he thought might work. He transmitted it to the other inner council members for approval. They suggested minor changes, but the core message remained the same. Then came the hardest part: actually sending it. Once that message left council space, there was no taking it back. The council would be officially admitting they needed humanity's help. Every species would know they had been wrong about humans. The political consequences would be severe. Another report came in. 2 more worlds had gone silent. Veltaran sent the message. It transmitted across the galaxy, traveling through relay stations and jump gates, finally reaching the border of human space. There it was received by the same officer who had turned away every other council communication for 50 years. Kunbei read the message with growing surprise. This wasn't like the other messages. This was an admission of failure, a plea for help, and an offer of real partnership. It was everything humanity had wanted 50 years ago, offered now out of desperation rather than respect. He forwarded it to Earth immediately with a priority flag. This wasn't something he could just acknowledge and file away. This required real decisions from real leaders. The message reached Premier Daehyun-song's desk within an hour. He read it twice, then called an emergency cabinet meeting. The council was begging for humanity's help. The question was simple: should they give it? The debate was about to begin, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The council diplomatic vessel emerged from jump space at the edge of the Sol system, humanity's home territory. It was massive, designed to impress, with gleaming hull plating and running lights that formed elaborate patterns. A ship meant for ceremony, not war. High Counselor Veltaran stood on the bridge and wondered if this had been a mistake. 20 human warships surrounded them within seconds. They were smaller than the diplomatic vessel, but they moved with a precision and speed that made the council ship look clumsy by comparison. Their weapons were locked on target. One wrong move and the diplomatic vessel would be debris. Admiral Hyeji-nam watched the council ship from the bridge of her flagship. She was 62 years old now, gray-haired and sharp-eyed. She had been a junior officer when humanity left the council. She remembered the humiliation, the dismissals, the casual contempt. She remembered watching pirates attack human ships while council peacekeepers did nothing. Now the council needed help, and she was supposed to welcome them with open arms. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Scan them," she ordered. "Full spectrum. I want to know if they're carrying anything besides diplomats and good intentions." The scans came back clean. No hidden weapons, no suspicious cargo. Just a diplomatic delegation and a lot of hope. "Send them the approach vectors," Hyeji said. "Tight formation. If they deviate even slightly, light them up." The council ship followed the instructions perfectly, moving slowly toward Earth. It took 3 days to reach orbit. 3 days of being escorted by human warships that never gave them a moment's freedom. 3 days for Veltaran to understand just how much things had changed. Premier Daehyun-song had spent those 3 days debating with his cabinet. General Wu Jinhan wanted to refuse the council entirely. "They left us to die for 20 years, he argued. "They ignored our distress calls, dismissed our proposals, and treated us like primitive children. Now they're losing a war and suddenly we're good enough to talk to? Let them burn." Director Yoonji Park from External Affairs disagreed. "The Carracks are an extinction threat. If the council falls, how long before the Carracks reach human space? A year? 2? We're strong. But can we face an enemy that destroyed 847 species? We need the council's resources and information, even if we don't need their approval." The debate went back and forth. Some argued for revenge, others for pragmatism. Some wanted to help out of moral obligation. Others saw it as a strategic opportunity. Daehyun listened to all of them and made his decision. They would meet with the council delegation, but on human terms. In Seoul, on Earth, in humanity's capital. The council delegation landed at Seoul's diplomatic complex on a cold morning. Veltaran stepped off the ship and felt Earth's gravity pull at him, slightly heavier than what his species was used to. He had prepared for this physically. But nothing prepared him for the emotional weight of walking on humanity's homeworld after 50 years of silence. The complex was beautiful, built in a style that mixed traditional Korean architecture with modern materials. Gardens surrounded the buildings, carefully maintained despite the winter cold. Human guards stood at attention, their weapons obvious but not threatening. Everything was designed to show strength without aggression, confidence without arrogance. They were escorted to a conference room that overlooked the city. Seoul stretched to the horizon, a vast metropolis of 50 million people, all human. Veltarin had seen cities on thousands of worlds, but there was something different about this one. It felt alive in a way council cities didn't. It felt young and urgent and determined. Premier Daehyun Song entered the room with his key advisors. He was tall for a human, gray hair cut short, wearing a simple suit that somehow made him look more authoritative than any ceremonial robes could. He sat across from Veltarin and waited. Veltarin had prepared a speech, carefully crafted words about cooperation and mutual benefit. Looking at Daehyun's face, he realized that speeches wouldn't work here. Humanity was done with diplomatic language and empty promises. They wanted truth. We were wrong, Veltarin said simply. For 20 years we treated your species with contempt. We dismissed your proposals without consideration. We ignored your warnings. We left you unprotected. We refused to investigate evidence of crimes because it was politically inconvenient. We were arrogant and you paid the price. I cannot undo what was done, but I can acknowledge it. We were wrong. Daehyun's expression didn't change. An apology doesn't bring back the people who died because council peacekeepers ignored our distress calls. No, it doesn't. Veltarin agreed. Nothing can do that, but perhaps we can ensure it never happens again. He laid out the situation, the Karex invasion, the fallen worlds, the desperate battles being lost. He held nothing back, explaining exactly how badly the council was losing. It was humiliating to admit weakness so openly, but Veltarin understood that anything less than complete honesty would end the negotiation immediately. You're losing, Daehyun said when Veltarin finished. You're losing badly and you need our military strength to survive. What are you offering in return? Everything you asked for 50 years ago, Veltarin replied. A seat on the inner council with full voting rights. Recognition as an equal power. Complete autonomy over your military forces. Trade privileges. Territory rights. And formal reparations to families affected by our negligence. Not enough, General Woo Jin-han said from his position beside Daehyun. You're offering us what we should have had from the start. That's not a gift, it's barely an apology. Veltarin had expected this. What else do you want? Daehyun looked at his advisors, then back at Veltarin. Complete autonomy over human military operations. No council oversight, no committee approvals, no bureaucratic delays. If we fight this war, we fight it our way. Agreed, Veltarin said immediately. Reparations paid to all affected families, not just some. Full accounting of every incident where council peacekeepers failed to protect human citizens. Agreed. Formal recognition of all territorial claims that were denied during our council membership. No disputes, no negotiations. Our claims are recognized in full. Agreed. A permanent veto on the inner council. Any decision we oppose stops immediately. That one was harder. A veto power meant humanity could block any proposal they disagreed with. It was more power than any single species had ever held. Veltarin thought about the alternative, about watching worlds burn while committees debated responses. Agreed. And finally, Daehyun said, his voice cold, the Vrelians face justice for their genetic experiments. Public trial, full disclosure, real consequences. Veltarin had known this was coming. The Vrelians were a powerful species, and putting them on trial would cause massive political turmoil within the council. But Lysara had been right in the inner council meeting. They had humiliated humanity first. If some humiliation came back to the council now, they had earned it. It will cause problems, Veltarin said carefully. The Vrelians have allies within the council. Some species will see this as human revenge rather than justice. It is justice, Director Yoonji Park said firmly. They conducted illegal experiments on sentient beings. They threatened war when caught. They used their council position to avoid consequences. That ends now. Veltarin looked at her, this human woman who spoke with such certainty about right and wrong. The council had spent centuries learning to see everything in shades of gray, to understand that absolute positions were dangerous. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe some things were absolutely wrong and pretending otherwise was cowardice, not wisdom. Agreed, he said. The Vrelians will face trial. Daehyun stood and walked to the window looking out over Seoul. You understand what you're offering? You're giving humanity real power in the council. Not ceremonial membership, but actual authority. We won't always do what you want. We won't always follow your traditions. We'll challenge the way things are done. I know, Veltarin said. That's what we need. The council has been following the same traditions for millennia. Those traditions kept us peaceful, but they also made us slow and unable to adapt. You challenged us 50 years ago and we rejected you for it. Now we're paying the price. He stood as well, facing Daehyun across the room. I cannot promise that working with humanity will be easy. Many council species still view you as too young, too aggressive, too different. But the alternative is extinction, and perhaps it's time the council learned from species who think differently. Daehyun turned to his advisors. They had a brief discussion in Korean, too quiet for the translators to pick up. Then he turned back to Veltarin. We'll accept your terms, all of them. But understand this, we're not doing this to save the council. We're doing this because the Kareks are a threat to everyone, including humanity. If working with you stops them, then we'll work with you. But this doesn't erase the past. Trust has to be earned, and you have 50 years of mistakes to make up for. I understand, Veltarin said, and I accept those terms. They shook hands, a human gesture that Veltarin had learned about but never performed. It felt significant, this physical contact that sealed an agreement between species that had been enemies in all but name. The news spread quickly. Within hours, every council world knew that humanity had agreed to help. Some celebrated. Admiral Hyeji Nam stood before 300 human captains and 2,000 council officers in the massive briefing hall of Forward Station 7. The station sat at the edge of the war zone, close enough to the front lines to respond quickly, far enough back to be defensible. It was a council station, but it felt different now. Human ships filled the docks. Human personnel moved through the corridors. The whole place hummed with an urgency that hadn't existed before. She looked at the assembled officers, seeing uncertainty in many of the council faces. They had been fighting this war for months, losing battle after battle. Now they were being told to follow the tactics of a species they had dismissed as primitive barbarians. She could see the doubt in their eyes. I know what you're thinking, Hyeji said, her voice carrying through the hall's speakers. You're wondering why you should listen to humans. You've been fighting this war longer than we have. Your species are older, more experienced. Why should you follow our tactics? She paused, letting the question hang in the air. Because you're losing. Every battle, every engagement, every skirmish. You follow tactics that are centuries old. Tactics designed for peacekeeping, not war. The Kareks don't care about your traditions. They don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They just keep coming, and your tactics can't stop them. Some of the council officers shifted uncomfortably. But they didn't leave. They knew she was right. Human tactics are different, Hyeji continued. We're aggressive. We take risks. We adapt quickly. Most importantly, we understand something you've forgotten. In war, the side that acts first usually wins. While you're forming committees and seeking consensus, we're already moving. That's how we beat the Karek scouts. That's how we'll beat their main fleet. She brought up a holographic display showing the Tertian sector, a star system with 8 planets and critical strategic value. The Kareks are moving on this system. Intelligence says they'll arrive in 4 days. If they take it, they'll have a direct route to the core worlds. We can't let that happen. Captain Jinho Choi of the HSA Relentless stepped forward to explain the battle plan. He was 45, veteran of a dozen pirate conflicts, and he explained tactics with the ease of someone who had done this many times before. Standard Council doctrine says we should form a defensive line and wait for them to attack, Jinho said. Then we trade fire at long range until one side retreats or is destroyed. That doesn't work against the Kareks. They swarm from multiple directions and your ships are too slow to reposition. He manipulated the hologram showing ship movements. Instead, we use what humans call aggressive defense. We don't wait for them. We split our fleet into 3 groups. 2 groups flank wide, using their jump drives to appear at the edges of the system. The 3rd group, made up of the heaviest council ships, positions in the center. A council captain raised his hand. That divides our forces. If the Kareks concentrate on one group, they'll be overwhelmed. That's the idea, Jinho said with a slight smile. We want them to commit to attacking one group. That's when the other two groups jump in behind them. The center group holds their attention while the flanking groups hit them from angles they can't defend. We use the Council's heavy ships as bait and anvil, while human ships act as the hammer. Another Council officer spoke up. These flanking maneuvers require precise timing and coordination. If one group is late, the others will be destroyed. That's why we've been running simulations for 2 weeks, Hyeji said. Every captain in this room has practiced these maneuvers until they can do them in their sleep. We're not going into this blind. We're going in prepared. Over the next 2 days, the fleet assembled in the Tertian sector. Council ships moved into defensive positions in the center, their massive hulls bristling with weapons. Human ships took the flanking positions, their smaller size and faster engines making them perfect for rapid deployment. Commander Inseo Kwan ran final checks on his squadron of 12 human frigates. They would be part of the northern flanking group, jumping in behind the Carrax line once the enemy committed to the center. It was a dangerous position, but Inseo had volunteered for it. He believed in the plan, and more importantly, he believed in his crew. The Carrax arrived exactly when intelligence predicted. Thousands of ships dropped out of jump space and immediately began moving toward the Council defensive line. They moved in a swarm pattern, no clear formation, just a mass of vessels converging on the center. Hyeji watched from the Indomitable's bridge. "Hold," she ordered as the Carrax closed the distance. "Let them commit." The Council ships in the center began firing, their heavy weapons tearing into the Carrax front ranks. But the Carrax kept coming, absorbing losses that would have caused any other species to retreat. Their return fire hammered the Council shields. "They're committing everything to the center," Jinho reported from his position on the relentless. "Northern and southern flanks are clear." "Execute," Hyeji ordered. The flanking groups jumped. One moment the space behind the Carrax swarm was empty. The next 600 human ships appeared in perfect formation and opened fire. The Carrax, focused entirely on the Council center line, had no ships in position to defend their rear. Human weapons cut through the Carrax formation like a blade. Missiles locked onto targets and struck with precision. Energy weapons tracked enemy ships and fired in coordinated volleys. The Carrax tried to turn and face this new threat, but turning meant exposing their flanks to the Council center. They were caught in a crossfire. Inseo's squadron targeted Carrax command ships, larger vessels that seemed to coordinate sections of the swarm. "Take out the commanders, break the coordination." His frigates moved fast, dodging return fire and staying just out of effective range while their long-range missiles did the work. The battle lasted 16 hours. It was brutal and exhausting, but the humans had trained for this. Council crews, exhausted after the first few hours, watched in amazement as human crews maintained their focus and precision throughout. These humans didn't just know how to fight, they knew how to endure. When the Carrax finally broke and retreated, they left behind wreckage from half their fleet. The Council forces had taken losses too, but far fewer than in any previous engagement. It was the first major Council victory in the war, and it had been won using human tactics. News of the victory spread across Council space. The morale boost was immediate and dramatic. For months, every report had been defeat and death. Finally, there was hope. But Hyeji knew one battle didn't win a war. She immediately began planning the next engagement, using the lessons learned from Tertian. The Carrax would adapt, so humanity had to adapt faster. Over the next 2 years, the pattern repeated. The Carrax attacked, the combined fleet met them with human tactics, and the Carrax were pushed back. Slowly, system by system, the occupied worlds were liberated. It wasn't easy. Thousands of ships were lost. Tens of thousands of personnel died. But the tide had turned. Commander Inseo Kwan established training programs for Council officers who wanted to learn human tactics. At first, only a few signed up, mostly younger officers willing to try something new. But as the victories mounted, more and more Council personnel requested the training. They wanted to learn what made humans so effective in combat. Dr. Hana Song, granddaughter of Doyen, watched the proceedings with mixed emotions. She was 52 now, a xenobiologist like her grandmother Jiwon had been. She remembered stories about the old days, about how the Council dismissed human proposals and ignored human warnings. Now those same Council species were eagerly studying human military doctrine. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity had been called too aggressive, too violent, too uncivilized for the Council. But those aggressive tendencies, that willingness to fight, were exactly what saved the galaxy from extinction. The traits the Council condemned were the traits that preserved their existence. The final push came in the war's third year. The combined fleet, now numbering over 10,000 ships with perfect coordination between human and Council forces, launched a massive offensive into Karek's territory. Admiral Haeji Nam led from the front, her flagship at the center of the assault. They found the Karek's primary hive nexus in a system at the edge of the galaxy. It was massive, a structure the size of a planet pulsing with energy. This was the heart of the Karek's operation, the source of their coordination. Destroy it and the entire Karek's fleet would lose cohesion. The battle for the nexus lasted 3 days. The Kareks threw everything they had at the combined fleet, defending their heart with desperate ferocity. Ships on both sides were destroyed by the hundreds, space filled with debris and radiation. But the combined fleet kept pushing forward using every tactic humanity had taught them. When the final assault came, it was a Council ship that delivered the killing blow. A massive dreadnought firing every weapon simultaneously into the Nexus core. The explosion lit up the entire system. Without the Nexus, the Karek's ships stopped coordinating. They became individuals rather than a swarm, confused and disorganized. The combined fleet destroyed them systematically, chasing the survivors back into dark space beyond the galaxy's edge. The war was over. Premier Dae-hyun Song traveled to the Council's grand station for the formal ceremony, marking humanity's return to the Council.